Call to order. And so we'll first do the remote attendance, please.
Yes, Your Honor, I would like to make a motion to approve the remote.
Attendance, please.
Yes, Your Honor, I would like to make a motion to approve the remote electronic attendance of 2nd Ward Alderman David Parker, 3rd Ward Alderman Mike Wendt, 6th Ward Alderman Kevin Schoonmaker, Alderman at Large Sonia Berg at the Committee of the Whole and City Council meetings of September 22nd, 2020. Second.
Thank you. We have a motion by Alderman Moyer and a second by Alderman Waldron. Roll call, please.
Alderman Potter,
Aye.
Moyer,
Aye.
Schoonmaker,
Aye.
Waldron,
Aye.
Berg,
Aye.
Williams,
Aye.
Parker,
Aye.
Wendt,
Aye.
8 ayes, no nays.
That motion carries. So before we get started, we had some conversation before the meeting started. Alderman Berg was concerned about not having early access, and that's intentional. And so I just want to run an explanation by the council. So when you are logged in and you have access to each other, there's casual conversations that are going on. There's also conversations here in the chambers that aren't open meeting conversations. And so what we want to do, because the meeting hasn't started yet, we need to restrict that conversation. So in the future, what will happen is you will come into a holding area and then David will open it up when we're ready to call the meeting into order. So you will not have access to being able to speak to anybody on the council floor or have access to speak to each other until the meeting is opened. If you have an issue with getting logged in, you all have my cell phone. Please contact me on my cell phone. I'll keep my cell phone here handy, and I'll make sure that we address any technical issues. Does anybody have any concerns about managing it that way? Hearing none, we are going to move on. Are there any questions on the agenda this evening? Hearing none, we'll begin with the agenda items. Our first item this evening is Solid Waste Assistance Grant, the SWAG grant. Rod Schick will be presenting.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Each year, the city is eligible to apply for the Solid Waste Assistance Grant to be used for the management of solid waste and recycling activities that are not related to regular operational costs. Historically, we've used this for our cleanup events in neighborhoods. We've done a lot of management of the Rick Wilma's drop-off recycling center, and a lot of other activities related to cleanup events with Earth Week and Keep Moline Beautiful Commission, those sorts of things. And so this year is no different from that. We did, in speaking, Alderman Schoonmaker had asked about getting some improvements done at the recycling center. Some of the concrete is getting a little bit rough, and so this year we did designate $15,000 towards the concrete repairs there at the recycling center. And so it's an item seeking approval to complete the application for the Solid Waste Assistance Grant and the maximum amount of $32,612, and staff recommends approval.
Motion to approve?
Second.
We have a second by Alderman Moyer. And Alderman Berg, you have a significant amount of feedback. Is there anything that you could modify maybe for your audio? Are you calling in or are you on your computer audio?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, it sounds better now. We don't have the feedback. Can you turn your mic on again so we can hear if there's a feedback? Yeah, so there's odd feedback with you, Alderman Berg. Would you mind calling into the meeting? So disconnecting from your audio on your computer, still do the video on your computer, but call in instead and use the cell phone? Is that we won't.
That's fine.
Huh? Thank you. So we have a motion by Alderman Waldron, a second by Alderman Moyer. Is there any discussion on this item? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Is Alderman Berg going to be able to answer? Do we need to wait a minute?
Let's, if she's not ready by the time you get to her, we'll come
All
back.
right, we'll try. Alderman Potter,
Aye.
Moyer,
Aye.
Schoonmaker,
Aye.
Waldron,
Aye.
Berg,
Aye.
Williams,
Aye.
Parker,
Aye.
Wendt,
Aye.
8 ayes, no nays.
That motion carries. Alderman Berg, are you okay now? Because you sounded good when you said aye.
I don't know how to call in, so I'm just going to try to do the best I can with these earphones.
It sounds really good right now. So we don't have the feedback now. It's like this, I don't know how to describe it, but like a tinny, screechy kind of background.
Okay.
Waldron said that was a good description, tinny, screechy. But it sounds good right now. Thank you, Alderman Berg. The
Thank you.
next is amendment to Chapter 34, Water and Sewer of the Moline Ordinances, Stormwater, and Carol Barnes has punted to Dirk Fries.
That's right, Carol is on the phone, or on the Ring Central, but this is really from legal, same for the next one. But they come out of that work session we had with Carol about some accounting practices, some tweaks to be made to financial fund policies. Those things are still in the works. These are the first two of the items coming out of that meeting where council gave us some direction. This first one, having to do with water and sewers, is taking up the idea that you had to use some of the WPC funds, which essentially is sanitary sewer funds, to help prevent infiltration of the stormwater into the sewer system, because that's expensive. Treating every drop of water is quite expensive, and getting stormwater in on top of the sanitary just is an unnecessary expense. There's not an obligation at present to treat stormwater. We were headed that way. The prior presidential administration, they figured out nobody could treat all that, so we are going to keep the systems separate. But when you keep the systems separate, infiltration is important to articulate, and we're doing that in the storm sewer section for this reason. The storm sewer utility, and Stuart Diamond from my office did the appellate case that upheld the storm utility next door in Rock Island. As a utility, the fees have to go toward the particular purposes of the utility. And to not be an illegal tax, you have to be able to avoid the fee by not using the utility. So if you could prove you were a net keeper of water, you wouldn't pay a stormwater utility. On the other side, for WPC, if you never got on hooked up and weren't a sewer user, you wouldn't pay sewer fees. And so the two groups are different. And so we can't just merge the two, because technically users of the sewer and users of stormwater might be two different groups. Unless we're combining those systems physically, we can't combine the funds. So how can we then use WPC funds to prevent infiltration? Well, that's a broad delegation of authority, provided we stay within some statutory limits about our reserves and that the rates are sufficient to pay for itself. We're all good there. But infiltration, we want to recognize as a real purpose for both. And at the moment, neither our plan nor the ordinance about stormwater mentions infiltration. And the cases on stormwater utility, because they view it more suspiciously, that this invention of this utility was a new thing, you have to have a plan that says preventing infiltration is something we're going to spend that money on. We don't have to have a plan on sewer side, although we do, but we do have to have a plan, and we do for stormwater. So this small tweak is to make sure that we stay within the bumpers for a legal fee and not an illegal tax. And then we can get and use WPC funds to help prevent infiltration of the sanitary sewer system with stormwater by improving the storm system. So all that to mitigate the risk of being declared an illegal tax.
Motion to approve?
Second.
We have a motion by Alderman Waldron, and I believe the second was Alderman Went. Is there any discussion on this item? Alderman Potter.
What we're doing now is just amending the intent here is just to amend the code that will define how we're, under our sewer ordinance, how we're going to be able to use some of these funds for the infiltration and the stormwater uses that.
Correct.
Because one of my concerns was, when we were talking about, is how there should be a way to somewhat measure that in terms of the difference between regular flow and storm flow. And that would be a separate issue from this.
Right, in terms of the measure of the quantity, that there are devices that, and people do that to try and figure out what the cost has been of infiltration. So there are studies that do it. The studies that I've been part of have been expensive, because you can imagine setting up the flow rates and the monitors and all the other things. But there's no doubt that storm infiltration of sanitary is a costly thing for the city.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? Roll call, please.
Alderman Potter,
Aye.
Moyer,
Aye.
Schoonmaker,
Aye.
Waldron,
Aye.
Berg,
Aye.
Williams,
Aye.
Parker,
Aye.
Went.
Aye.
8 ayes, no nays.
That motion carries. Thank you. The next item is amendment to Chapter 31, Taxation of the Moline Code of Ordinances, Hotel Motel Tax. Dirk Price.
So same thing, this comes out of the conversation with Carol about how we're using different funds and trying to maximize the efficiency and the use of them. So hotel motel taxes were first authorized by the legislature, and for non-home rule communities, they had to be used for tourism. And so the home rule lawyers figured out that, well, we can do something else. Instead of taxing the occupation where the hotelier pays the tax, we can charge it on the guest for the privilege of staying, so it becomes a quote-unquote privilege tax. And that worked fine, only the legislature tried to respond to that, at least on the non-home rule side, to say the non-home rules can't do it. And then the cases challenging that have looked at a couple of factors. And just to make sure we, again, stay down the middle for a legal privilege tax, we wanted to make it clear that, and we talked about this at the last meeting, in the rare instance where the failure of the guest to pay it actually over in funds to the hotelier happens, the hotelier is forgiven from delivering those funds to us. That way it's clear that the tax always remains on the guest, not on the occupation of running a hotel or motel. And so in that way, we preserve our ability to use these funds for general fund purposes as opposed to just tourism.
Motion to approve?
Second.
We have a motion by Alderman Waldron and a second by Alderman Moyer. Is there any discussion on this item? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Alderman Potter,
Aye.
Moyer,
Aye.
Schoonmaker,
Aye.
Waldron,
Aye.
Berg,
Aye.
Williams,
Aye.
Parker,
Aye.
Went.
Aye.
8 ayes, no nays.
That motion carries. Thank you, Dirk. I do not believe we have any other this evening, so we'll move into the informationals. Our first informational is amendment to Chapter 8, Building and Other Construction and Building Services, and 25, Planning and Development of the Moline Code of Ordinances, Historic Preservation Commission Demolition Review. Alderman Potter, will you be presenting this evening?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. In the Historic Preservation Commission for the last several months, we've been discussing this item. This is Historic Preservation sees this as an opportunity as an educational tool in addition to the ability to preserve potential demolition of structures that are historic or important to the city's history or whatever. If you've read the text, what it will allow is that if the Preservation Commission, when a building demolition permit is being sought through the building official, deems that the property has historical value, and it would allow for the commission to put a hold on that. Within 15 days, they would hold a hearing or review the application to determine that, and then could put a hold for 60 days. And all this does is basically hit a pause button. The Preservation Commission would have no ability to halt this, but simply to pause it. And it would allow for a number of different things. If you read under Section C, perhaps we could find a new owner, somebody who might be interested in preserving or rehabilitating it. Perhaps the structure could be moved. Perhaps they were unaware of the ability to obtain state or federal or some other kinds of funds for a structure like this. In very rare cases, I would imagine sometimes it might actually be designated as a local historic landmark. If it was to proceed towards demolition, it would allow time for salvaging of historical architectural details, which has occurred on a number of recent demolitions. For instance, the old Collector Center, the depot down near the bridge project, and a number of other things like that. And It would also allow time for documentation of such structure if in fact that was to happen. It's important to note that the building official retains complete ability to, if he or she determines that the building is unsafe or there's a threat to life or safety, that would overrule any action by the Historic Preservation Commission. So, like I said, this is an attempt to begin a public education campaign. It's happened in another number of other communities where we let people know that, this structure here is important and this is the reason for it. I think it will be used very sparingly. For instance, there's a number of homes that, in the community that recently, through some CDBG funds, have been demolished, and I would be surprised if any of those would have made onto this list. Beyond that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Alderman Williams.
You have 50 years. How did you come up with 50 years? So anything before 1970 would qualify in the city?
Yeah. That's a
Historic.
general rule in preservation is usually structures over 50 years. Generally in terms of architectural and historical nature, 50 years is generally something that has been done. If I can, I want to make one more point. During the review process, this went back to legal counsel, some of the folks in Ansel Link who actually have expertise in areas up in the suburbs of Chicago, we're wondering why it wasn't more restrictive, and we thought, well, we didn't think it was something that was we would want to introduce in this community. There are communities that have more restrictive covenants like this and allow preservation commissions more authority, and we didn't think that was appropriate on our community.
Alderman Waldron.
You mentioned other cities and communities have done this. Has anybody done it local? There's Rock Island, East Moline, anybody, Cove Valley?
I don't believe so.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Alderman Nguyen.
Thank you, Your Honor. I appreciate it, and I like this approach, but I was wondering if they would be open to adding just a provision under C that once something is identified and that 60-day hold is put on, that written notification is also given to the council, just so that we're on notice that it's happened. I think there's a number of things that sometimes happen, and then we hear about it later down the road and say, hey, well, this has been going through, we've been working on it. I think that adding something where we get written notification immediately upon that 60-day being implemented, I think would be appropriate.
I think that would be a good
I
suggestion.
have a question, this will probably be more for Dirk. So if this was passed by council, would the council have the authority to override it in a situation for whatever reason we deemed appropriate?
Yep, you always have the ability to, well, first of all, as a home rule community, you don't have to abide by your own ordinance. So if it came to council, it wouldn't require a hearing. It could be something where from the floor you could direct that it be an exception to the rule. So yes, you always have the power to do that without having to pass an ordinance per se.
And then I have another question. Is there a difference between, I always want to be careful about being heavy-handed from a government perspective of a private property owner and what they do with their own property versus a publicly owned property and how we manage those? Is there a difference in your proposal?
There is no difference, but I think it's important to, note that, this was narrowly drawn in terms of there's only a 15-day window to notify the owner, begin, the process and whatever, and the entire process only lasts 60 days. After, at the end of 60 days, it's automatically, the
I mean-
hold is automatically removed.
I have community members that don't want to wear a mask. And so, it is, although it may seem reasonable from the Historic Preservation Commission's perspective, it may not seem reasonable to an individual property owner. And so that's a little concerning to me because I don't have a sense of how they would feel about that in these situations. Because I'm thinking of a lot of properties. The Spiegel building is publicly owned now, but we've got the library is not publicly owned, the old library,
Right.
the dispatch, there's some other properties that would probably meet this standard and be considered by the Historic Preservation Society to be a historical significance that we would be, impacting what a private property owner may want to do with it. So, I don't think I have any other questions. Alderman Potter.
If I could respond to that, as a for instance, the Carnegie Library, I would think that would be something that would definitely have a place here in terms of, if a private property owner like that wanted to demolish that building, I would think the public would want us to, to say, can we talk about this? And this allows for that pause, if you will. Is there some other thing that we can do? Can we help you find tax credits? Can we help you find alternatives? Would you be willing to sell it to someone else who may want to rehabilitate it? Just one of the, that would be that's the intent. And I think that your comments in terms of not wanting to infringe on private property rights are part of the reason why, as we headed down this path, we intentionally made this less restricted than examples of other ordinances that we saw.
Well, thank you for the information. I appreciate it. Oh, Alderman Parker?
Thank you, Your Honor. Alderman Potter, did this come up because of a certain situation, or is this just, how did this come about?
Actually, this was brought by a local person, the folks who now maintain the Butterworth area, Stofers and Mark Stofer Hunter. They enacted similar legislation in Cedar Rapids after the great floods and the numerous demolitions that occurred after that, as a way to just bring attention to the fact that there were a number of historic structures and other things, and trying to figure out if there were, alternate things to, mass demolition. It was a suggestion from him, and the commission began reviewing it and thought this is something we should do in terms of being proactive.
Alderman Schoonmaker?
I don't really have an objection here. I just am thinking about, there's a lot of situations where hitting the pause button might not be beneficial to anybody. There's a lot of garages that have gotten torn down in the last few years. Maybe that's initiated because Brad has been starting those processes, but I'm thinking of things like that where you're going to tear down a garage and build a new one. You're applying for a demolition permit. I think this would still cover that. Can we do something to exempt some of those type of situations? And I'm thinking too about, housing versus commercial and how that would apply. And I certainly understand, thank you. I certainly understand that, there are historically significant houses that we would want to address. Just trying to parse this apart a little bit. And I don't mean to make it more complicated, but I'm thinking about the individual that comes in and wants to get going because the new garage is getting delivered next week, or they're ready to start building their new home and they're tearing down a 1950s house that has a hole in the roof anyways, and now we're going to tell them they got to wait.
Alderman Potter?
And that would only occur if this would get run by in an email or whatever, or call to the Preservation Commission. And generally speaking, as your example of a garage, a garage that needs to come down, no one would object. I'm thinking unless it's, was like the carriage house at the deer.
Good point, yeah.
I mean, other than that, no one is going to object to, some garage. And if it's already been deemed unsafe by the neighborhood improvement officer, for instance, as you were referenced, then the building official has the authority to step in and say,
Take it down.
it can come down.
So logistically, if it's, so they have 15 days to decide, the Historic Preservation Commission has 15 days to decide. What is the meeting frequency? Do you meet every 2 weeks?
We meet once a month, but the ordinance would specifically suggest that, if in fact, the commission only has 15 days, basically the ordinance would be set up so that you have a 15-day window. If you don't review it and get back, then you have no ability to.
I'm just a little concerned with that structure, that would result in one commissioner being able to make the decision to put a hold. Because if you don't have a meeting, how is that going to be held?
Well, I think we would call it would entail a special meeting being called. That's what it would entail. We had discussion about that on a number of times. And somebody, and we specifically realized that if in fact we were going to do that, that's what it would entail, is that the commission would have to have convene a special meeting immediately within that 15-day window.
How many demolition permits do we have flow through the city a year?
I didn't hear you.
How many demolition permits do we have flow through the city per year?
Oh, gosh.
I don't have that offhand, Mayor, but I mean, I can tell you this is something that seems to be.
I'm sorry to make you, but could you, because I can't hear you. Thank you.
We can certainly look for those numbers. I don't have them offhand, but I mean, a garage demolition to me seems like a fairly, weekly or every other week type thing, because Brad is finding them out there. There are code violations sometimes. So, or a lot of the times when a new garage is coming in, you have a demo tied to that. So, I
So
think,
can we say garages aren't included to avoid the most frequent demolitions?
The council can do whatever they want. I can tell you specifically the Preservation Commission, spent a considerable amount talking about that, and they thought they were comfortable with using any structure because of the fact that there could be something out there. Likelihood, not much. Like I said, there's something like the carriage house at Deer Wyman, which I'm sure they wouldn't take down, but I mean something like that might be deemed historically significant. The garages in my neighborhood that have been demolished in the last 3 years there would be no pause. There would be no roadblocks between when that person asked for a demolition permit and being able to build their new garage. It wouldn't be a problem.
Alderman Williams?
Has the commission identified the historic properties already, the homes in the commercial areas that they would deem historic? Or do they just wait for it to show up to them? Or have they gone out and proactively identified those homes and those businesses that they would want to save? Or is it just anything built before 1970?
I would say that's a yes and no. I mean, in terms of, like, if you're familiar with, there's a walking tour of the downtown now which has become very popular, and there's literally in excess of, I think, 100 different identified structures in the downtown walking area, and those are all very important and historic. In terms of neighborhoods and stuff like that, basically few and far between, I would think.
Alderman Parker?
Thank you. Alderman Potter, I think this is probably a pretty good idea, but I had a question. So you have that 2-week window, and you have to gather the historical society together for a meeting. What happens if you aren't able to get a quorum in those 2 weeks? Does it just drop off and we move forward, or what happens?
I would think.
I know a lot of these commissions and these, it's hard to get a quorum together, especially on a non-regular basis.
Yeah, if you can't, that's the idea, is that this follows a statutory model that, again, looking at that when you're actually there, in terms of the camera. The statutory model is there's a window where it's deemed something, like deemed approved, if council doesn't, or the legislative body doesn't act within a certain time. So if the 2 weeks come and go and you couldn't get a special meeting together, it moves on. It's no longer do it. That's to the concerns the mayor has expressed and that you also expressed from the floor, that's a safeguard put in for the property owner.
Correct.
That unless we're really interested enough to make time in our day to have the Historic Preservation Commission meet, it just goes on.
You know, I think, so what I could see happening is every demolition in Moline gets held up 2 weeks because there'll be no response. I really think that we need to be thoughtful about what qualifies as justifying a 2-week window for the historic preservation to make a decision. So I'm not feeling great about the looseness of it to include.
Just one thing, the trigger is it has to be a decision there has to be an actual affirmative decision by the building inspector to say, this demolition has some historic value. It's not enough that it's just over 50, it's over 50 plus, as I understand the ordinance, a judgment call by Brad. So I didn't think that it's everyone that's over 50 automatic.
Brad is gonna run.
Where does it say that?
Well, who's making the judgment call?
The commission.
The commission.
Oh, the commission.
So it would be a 2-week hold on a garage.
See, I think we're getting caught up in the.
Well, this is our opportunity to address.
Well, I understand, but
we have to be careful about being too difficult to work with. I mean, government has a tendency to add stuff, controls. It makes it very difficult to do the right thing about pulling a permit for demolition. I don't want to encourage the behavior of, I don't want to pull a permit because I got to get this thing down in 2 weeks because I've got guys waiting. I've got,
And if I could just respond, I mean, I think that's the whole point is that, if it's a garage and it's falling down, the commission is not going to say, this is a historic structure. If someone's trying to demolish, a 150-year-old home, in a, that has historical significance in terms of, one of the founders of the city, you might want to say, geez, do you want to think about this? But, the normal, those are the kinds of things that would trigger this.
Alderman Waldron had a question, or a statement.
I didn't have a statement. I just think there's enough interest on the council that I'd like to make a motion to forward this on to the council for consideration with Alderman Nguyen's proviso that it's put in there that the council is given notice.
I'll second that.
We have a motion by Alderman Waldron and a second by Alderman Potter. Do we have any questions on that? I believe that Alderman Williams was going to make a comment.
No, I'm fine.
Okay. Alderman Went?
Thank you, Your Honor. I agree. I think we should move this forward, but I would like what Dirk had just mentioned as a suggestion or maybe some language on how that would look like, giving some discretion to the building official if they wind up getting, this is just some garage from a 1960s house that the person's taking down this garage and putting up a 3-car next to it, that they can say, hey, this doesn't need to go to Plan Commission, and that they only forward the things on that could have some real historical significance, just to see what that language looks like, and then we can debate that when we go through and finalize this next week.
That was going to be my comment too. I liked Dirk's direction. So, we just an override for the obvious things that they can just say, hey, this one doesn't qualify, and it's done that minute.
Do you want to make
up to 2 weeks?
Do you want to make an amendment for consideration by the council on that motion? Because otherwise, how will it come back to council? It'll come back in the form that the motion indicates, not a suggestion.
Right, but
I think we should decide that now. Alderman Potter?
For clarification purposes, there have been, in the last couple of years, I know there have been a couple of, at least 2 or 3 times that I can remember that there were things where there were changes. I remember one was a cell tower going up next to a historic structure, and the Preservation Commission was queried via email. Does anyone have any objection to this? And within the same day, there were all negative responses saying, no objection. And that's why I'm saying, in most cases, in the scenarios that you're referring to, that's how it would happen, is that those folks would be queried by staff, and everyone would say, no, I have no objection. That's a 75-year-old garage that, probably should be demolished. No problem. Move on.
Alderman Nguyen?
Well, I mean, if that's the case, then why do we have the 15 days? I guess for the average, what I'm looking for, and I don't have the language, I don't know exactly what it would say. I'd like to move this forward, put this on the agenda, but direct staff to provide alternative language that the direction that Dirk had said for us to contemplate next week. I'm assuming it'll be on next week's agenda to vote on.
Dirk's approaching the podium.
Right, the place I'm focusing on is an E to the proposed changes, where the building official makes a determination about whether there's a threat to health or safety. And that's where I think we can put the building official's judgment call, and that's kind of what I'm referring to, that if this was falling down, Brad's not submitting it to the Historic Commission. So we can include that to say things like, in his estimation that the value of the structure is outweighed by the cost of repair or whatever, which is a judgment call he already makes. I can try and get some language that way, so that in the case of a garage that's falling down, would take $20,000 to restore, I was a philosophy major. It's no longer Washington's axe. That was the question. This is the axe Washington used to chop down the cherry tree. The handle was replaced 100 years ago, and the head was replaced 50 years ago. But this is Washington's axe. And so that's where we're at with those kinds of historic things. And so I'll be tweaking E on the building official's judgment. That's where I'm at.
Any other comments? Roll call, please.
I'm sorry, so I thought there was an amendment. There is not. We're just
There is
adding
an
the tweaking.
amendment, and so the amendment, would you want to?
My amendment was to incorporate Alderman Nguyen's language of giving notice to the council when there's the 15-day hold. Isn't that correct, Alderman
I
Nguyen?
think that was included in the initial.
When
but
there's
yeah.
a 60-day hold.
Oh,
Everything will
okay.
have a 15-day hold.
60-day, you're correct.
Okay. Alderman Potter,
Aye.
Moyer,
Aye.
Schoonmaker,
Aye.
Waldron,
Aye.
Berg,
Aye.
Williams,
Nay.
Parker,
Aye.
Went,
Aye.
7 ayes, 1 nay.
Motion carries. The next item is out of city water customers report.
Do we-
J.D. Schulte will be presenting this evening.
Your Honor.
Don't we have to vote on the original motion, though?
No, because the original motion had that amendment incorporated into it. He just used the word amended. His motion had it, though.
I don't
So I
want to
think
get
we're good. Thank you.
sticky like last week.
Yeah, right? No, it's good. I think we're fine. Go ahead, J.D.
Thank you, Your Honor. Council, so on or before October 1st each year, we're to bring a list of outside water customers to council for to request your concurrence if you want us to issue notice to these. They're contiguous and eligible for annexation. So the list is on the report that was in the agenda, but Todd Green and the IT folks have put a map together. Just I know that sometimes the visual is better. So hopefully if folks are connected remotely, David's got it up so you can see the map and the different colors that illustrate which one of those properties is contiguous and which one is not. So with council concurrence, we are prepared to move forward to issue notices to the ones that have the contiguity and the contiguous and are served by the city water. If there are questions this evening, Your Honor, that process is typically handled by the planning and development folks, and so Chris is here tonight to answer any specific questions on that process.
Alderman Nguyen.
Thank you, Your Honor. First, JD, if you get a chance, could you forward us that map so we just have it for our records? That would be great. And two, I know when we started looking at this, I think we came back with a quite a bit of laundry list. There was like phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, that once the first group came in, then it made the second group eligible. Is this part of that process, and is this just the phase 1 of it? You had mentioned that this time of year, but are we kind of working through all of those that actually should have been brought into the city over the last number of years according to our code?
So you are correct on that last point, yes. These, I couldn't tell you exactly right now how long. Chris may have some history of how long some of these have been connected. And then, yes, back to your first question, these would be the first round. Once some of these become contiguous, they will, then they'll bring in another phase that had a second round. And I think Chris last year had put together a map that kind of talked through, I think at that point in time, Alderman Nguyen, I think there were right around 59 outside customers between water and sewer. But the ones with water had 4 steps, I think, before they all became contiguous. With the one outlier, you can see there's one outlier where we provide water through a agreement to a property up in East Moline that I think it is in their corporate limits and would, ultimately stay in their corporate limits.
Are there any other comments or questions? Alderman Nguyen.
So once these are done, what's kind of the time frame for the phase 2? I'm assuming it's not a year from now.
I would expect that these, when we give notice through the process and ordinance, it says, within 6 months, they're to navigate through the process. So I would expect with staffing, unless we have some task interference or things, there'll be public hearings and things that go on. Chris can probably speak to the timing that has to happen between those intervals. But I would expect the second phase would probably be ready in approximately 6 months.
Any other comments or questions? Thank you, JD.
Thank you, Your Honor.
The next item is the administrator's update. Marty Lonix.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. Just have one small item today. And this is an update on the library roof. So after the winning bidder, Geist Roofing, inspected the roof with Shive Hattery recently, they suggested a change to the scope of work and a change order that's going to result in significant savings for the city. Their inspection determined that a fair portion of the roof insulation does not need to be replaced. That can be left in place, and we'll still have a full 30-year warranty on the roof. So the inspection also found that we have an area where the coping could be capped, or should be capped. And so a majority of the roof has this protection in this area that doesn't, has failing grout and caulk. So adding the coping and addressing the problem, leaving part of the roof there, will result in a total deduction of $107,689 for the price of the roof, which is then total $525,711. And the council approved a bid for $633,400 on September 15th. So this is a significant change in the scope of work and the price. So I think we need a acknowledgement by the city council that that we have a change order.
Right, you need,
Dirk is approaching
You
the
need to get on
podium.
the microphone.
that's right. You need consensus of the council to concur in this change in scope, because the authority to save money is within the city administrator's power, but we're actually changing the scope of this project from what was presented and approved.
So are there any concerns about this plan moving forward? I don't hear any concerns. I'm curious to what the timeline is, though. When can we expect to
They're
have the
going to
roof
be
repaired?
starting in about 3 weeks.
Did they say how long it'll take?
About 6 weeks.
Will it disrupt the services to the community?
No.
Thank you. Thank you, Marty, appreciate
all I
it.
have
Oh,
today.
we've got a question. Alderman Parker. We have another.
Marty, have you talked to the buildings group with the library board yet on this?
No, I have not.
Might want to run that past them too, since they have, a say in that, or a vested interest in that.
Absolutely, yes, I will definitely do that.
Alderman Potter.
I've been made aware of a number of retirements and other things, people leaving within the city, and I was wondering when we're going to start talking about some of these important positions. For instance, I know we don't have a water plant operator now,
Yeah,
and
when
I
we get
continue
to-
to be concerned about the fact that there's nobody in our lab working there. So
I'm sorry, nobody what?
nobody working in our labs, as far as I'm concerned, is there?
I'm not aware that nobody's working in our labs. I do believe we have people in the labs. If we didn't have people in the labs, we'd probably be in violation of our EPA permit for our water. So those are, my understanding, they're being tested. The water's being tested and the lab is fully
I
equipped.
believe
Now,
Tony's available. Tony, are you in the building? Do you have access?
There are a couple lab techs leave.
I think the people.
I think that there have been people moved into those positions with a stipend to do that work.
I think the wastewater people are the ones that retired. The water people are still there.
There you go.
Tony or JD, could you
Okay.
please
I think
say,
it was
Tony,
Tony.
there he is. I saw him
Let
coming
me
in.
just say something about the retirements, though. As we move closer to presenting a full budget, we will incorporate those early retirements and what has happened there, along with any other efficiency ideas we have in the presentation of that budget. So you'll hear more about that very shortly.
Thank you. Tony,
Tony, go ahead.
you may not have heard, but Alderman Potter was concerned about the lab. And now I saw some information that came from, I think, Carol's office about individuals that had been upped in pay, at least, to provide lab services. So maybe you could address that concern.
That is correct. We had a couple retirements earlier in the year, around when COVID came, and we plugged other individuals into those roles. One individual was plugged in from our utility billing function. We were able to take an employee from that area because during the onset of COVID, we had a reduction in delinquency processing, so it was a little bit of a luxury there. And then another individual was transferred in from wastewater treatment operations, and he continues to stay there. However, a recent retirement is going to cause us to move him out of there, and we're going to shuffle another individual in there.
Does that answer your concern, Alderman Potter?
What about the water plant operator? How are we backfilling there?
We do not have a water plant operator vacancy. We have a water plant manager vacancy.
Excuse me.
Yeah, and it's my understanding we're working through that, a plan to.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Tony. I appreciate you stepping up. Thank you for the update, Marty. Was
Thank
there
you.
anything else you wanted to share with
Unless
us?
there's any questions from city council members.
I don't think so.
Thank you.
Thank you to our roof contractor for making that proposal. Is there any public comment this evening? Did we have anybody write in?
We did not, thank
I
you.
don't see any public here, so without any public comment, I'd like to close the committee of the whole and open up the council agenda. Alderman Potter, will there be an invocation this evening? There'll be no invocation, so we'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Alderman Williams,
Present.
Parker,
Present.
Went,
Present.
Potter,
Present.
Moyer,
Present.
Schoonmaker,
Present.
Waldron,
Present.
Berg.
Present.
Your Honor, I request approval of Committee of the Whole and Council meeting minutes of September 15th, 2020. Second reading ordinances. Council Bill 3027-2020, an ordinance amending Chapter 20, Motor Vehicles and Traffic of the Moline Code of Ordinances, Appendix 3, Pedestrian Crossing Signals, by repealing the designation for mid-block on 16th Street between 25th Avenue and 26th Avenues. Resolutions. Council Bill 1099-2020, a resolution authorizing the mayor and city clerk to approve and attest to an exception to the moratorium on hiring pursuant to Resolution 1051-2020 to hire 2 police officers in November to fill current vacancies and an additional 3 officers in January to fill upcoming vacancies.
Motion to approve the consent agenda. Parker.
Second, Went.
We have a motion by Alderman Parker, a second by Alderman Went. Roll call, please.
Alderman Potter,
Aye.
Moyer,
Aye.
Schoonmaker,
Aye.
Waldron,
Aye.
Berg,
Aye.
Williams,
Aye.
Parker,
Aye.
Went.
Aye.
8 ayes, no nays.
That motion carries.
Non-consent agenda, first reading ordinances. Council Bill 3023-2020, an ordinance amending Chapter 19 Mobile Homes and Mobile Home Parks of the Mulling Code of Ordinances to modify the regulations for mobile homes within the city. Council Bill 3028-2020, an ordinance amending Chapter 20 Motor Vehicles and Traffic of the Mulling Code of Ordinances, Appendix 7 thereof, one-way streets, by including 32nd Avenue from 4th Street to 7th Street, traveling westbound for the hours of 7:30 a.m. to 8:30 a.m. and 1:00 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. on school days. Council Bill 3029-2020, an ordinance amending Chapter 20 Motor Vehicles and Traffic of the Moline Code of Ordinances, Section 20-2202, loading zones, by including 12th Avenue from 41st Street to 48th Street for the hours of 7:30 a.m. to 8:30 a.m. and 1:00 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. on school days. And that is all I have this evening, Your Honor.
Thank you so much, Janine.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate it. I'd like to now turn to council business. If we could go around the room, and if you have anything, please shout out. Alderman Williams?
Nothing, Your Honor.
Thank you. Alderman Parker?
Yeah, I do have a question. Is Joe Kuhlenbach around?
Oh,
No?
no,
If not, then JD.
he's still here, yep.
JD, could you come back into the council chambers, please? Alderman Parker has a question for you. Thank you. Go ahead, Alderman Parker.
Thank you. JD, this is in regards to 19th Avenue between 1st Street and 16th Street. In the last week, have we gotten a grant?
Laura Clower is working on trying to identify when the next, are you talking about the STP grant, right? When the next award period is?
Okay, I'll talk about any grant, but
Yes, and they're working on identifying that and what eligibility we would have.
have we completed the engineering on it yet?
I don't think so.
Have we begun the engineering?
I don't think so.
Okay, I'll be back in 2 weeks. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, JD. Do you have anything else this evening, Alderman Parker?
No, I do not. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Went?
Yeah, thank you, Your Honor. Do we have an ETA on when those lights on the crosswalk on 16th Street are going to be taken down by Garfield? I almost witnessed an accident. Some guy was not paying attention. He was on his phone, but he must have glanced up and seen the blinking yellow light and slammed on his brakes, and the person behind him then swerved and moved into my lane and almost hit me. And so do we have kind of an ETA on when that is, or are we going to keep the blinking yellow lights on there?
Marty?
I have an answer to that question. On your agenda tonight is the second reading of that ordinance, and so it'll be removed to this week.
Terrific. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it, Your Honor.
Thank you. Alderman Potter?
Nothing, Your Honor.
Alderman Moyer?
Nothing, Your Honor.
Thank you. Alderman Schoonmaker?
Nothing, Your Honor.
Alderman Waldron?
Nothing, Your Honor.
Thank you. Alderman Berg?
Nothing, Your Honor.
Thank you. I don't really have anything specific. I did have a couple of requests for support from community members, and so I just don't know really who to turn to on these, but one of them was wanted to have restricted parking on her street. Marty, who is the right, if a resident was interested, I know I can go for residents.
Is this in relation to the trailer?
No, it's just wanted permit-only parking on her street. I think she wanted it restricted to homeowners.
So if we have a formal request, we'll take it to the Traffic Engineering Committee,
Okay.
which combination of police and public works and others, and we'll walk it through the process.
And then what is the right avenue if someone's struggling in a rental property with their landlord? Do
With
we
what?
have a renter is
Yes.
struggling with the maintenance of their rented property with their landlord? Do we provide any support services for that?
Between Brad Howman and our KJ, Whitley Community Development, they can manage that process, so.
Thank you so much. And then I wanted to publicly thank George Bryan. He's the I-74 corridor manager, and he provided a tour for me, so I got to walk the bridge, and it is, just as a heads up to the community, it is stunning up there. It is a beautiful bridge. It's 4 lanes wide. And then I don't know if everybody has followed, I mean, I've seen it 100 times, but every time I look at it, I see one more thing, that the 4th lane will be used for someone that's getting on the bridge and getting off immediately at the next riverfront. And so you don't even have to merge into traffic when you get on and off that bridge. It's just wonderful. And so the deadline right now is that it'll be usable for us traveling to Iowa by the end of the year. So everybody look forward to that. And that's all I have. Does staff have anything for the council this evening? And is there any public comment? Hearing none, do we have an executive session this evening?
Yes, Your Honor, I'd like to make a motion that the council convene an executive session for the purpose of discussion of collective negotiating matters, 5 ILCS 120/2C2, and appointment, employment compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees, 5 ILCS 122C1.
Is there a second?
Second, Parker.
Thank you. We have a motion by Alderman Williams, a second by Alderman Parker. Roll call, please.
Alderman Potter.
Aye.
Moyer.
Aye.
Schoonmaker.
Aye.
Waldron.
Aye.
Berg.
Aye.
Williams.
Aye.
Parker.
Aye.
Went.
Aye.
8 ayes, no nays.
That motion carries. Could we please clear the council chambers and close the public access to the meeting?